Hello and welcome. My name is Lexi Jong and here I like to talk about luxury beauty. Today we are going to be taking a look at this new limited edition Dior eyeshadow palette. This is number 509 Golden Bouquet. We have 7 grams of product. It's made in France, and like all other Dior shadows, it has a 6-month shelf life. So the key feature on here obviously is this gorgeous embossing with this like floral motif. I think is really very, very beautiful embossing on here. So let's start off with swatches. I do have 2 looks for you with this palette as well. And we're gonna talk a little bit about my thoughts on this palette while we look at those demos. But first, let's take a look at these swatches. So I'm going to do the middle shade. I'm gonna leave some space and put that middle shade there. But these are the other 4, and you can see without that middle shade, this is gonna be a very, very light palette. And then the middle shade here is going to be deep. So that's gonna really deepen things up. And in the demos, you know, you'll see I tried putting shadow on top. I also put that on top of other shadow to see, you know, whether or not you can kind of soften the brown a little bit. So we'll talk about that. But look how light this light shade is on my skin. It's very close to my skin tone. It's very, very white. But I did want to note that it's actually a kind of a dry shadow. So this is the only one that it's just not a great formula. This white one here, it's like an ivory with a little bit of warmth to it. That one, it's just a little bit drier, a little bit more powdery, and it just doesn't really have much presence. So let's take a look at these swatches here. The first shade, we have kind of like this beige tan kind of shade. There's a little bit of a more like, it's golden with a touch of orange kind of in it. Very soft, very light though, and you can see that that is going to have a satin finish. The white shade, as I mentioned, is going to be ivory with a touch of a soft golden warmth, but it really looks pretty white. And it's going to be a bit of a drier formula. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to have any sort of satin abilities in there, but it looks pretty matte. Whereas this middle shade, which is really a deep, dark brown, like almost like, not as much as a brown black, but just a really truly deep brown. It looks matte when you kind of spread it out like this. But if you're to build this up, let me just show you. It actually does have some satin qualities to it. So you can see a little bit of a sheen to it that isn't really, I can't tell if the white one is supposed to look like that on my skin tone or not. So the white looks actually a little bit more matte than this. However, this is matte with just a tiny bit of satin. If you kind of pile that up and blend it out, you'll see a little bit more of the satin. These other 2 shades are going to be satin with, yeah, they're going to be a true satin with a little bit of a metallic finish to them. They're going to be shimmery. And we have more of this coppery golden shade here, and this is going to be a soft pale gold. So I have a ton of comparisons that we're going to be doing at the end of the video. I mean, like seriously, a ton of palettes here that we're going to be looking at these, checking out comparisons. So definitely stay tuned for that. But first, let's do a couple of demos and I'll give you my thoughts on the palette. So overall, I think this palette is absolutely beautiful to look at. The embossing is stunning. I love the particular motif that they ended up using. I think it is really gorgeous. If you are a collector, this is definitely a great one to have in your collection. If you're purchasing it though for like everyday use and so forth, I don't think this is the best palette. It's not bad. It's a good palette. Quality is good on pretty much everything. The white shade, it's a little dry, but it's not bad per se. Definitely not, you know, a reason to not purchase the palette in my opinion. It's not that bad. But, you know, I was a little disappointed with how light these shades are. So this is one of those palettes where the shades are all pretty light, and on the lid, you know, they do look fairly similar on the actual lid. So at least on my skin tone. I think these lighter golden shades could really pop on some deeper skin tones, but I feel like the lighter and medium skin tones, you're not going to see as much of a distinction. So there's something to note there. Now this dark brown shade, I like having a dark brown in here For my particular complexion though, I would have preferred something just a little bit lighter. I did try to soften this deep brown shade to get something a little bit lighter to be able to use it better like in the crease and so forth. But you know, it's pretty deep for me. So overall, I think it's a really pretty palette, but it's not a must-have in my opinion. And yeah, so I think it's nice. When you are looking at this palette, the very first shade on the top left and that on the bottom right, they're both going to be soft gold, but the bottom right looks a little bit lighter. Other than that, I feel like the tones on those are very similar. So I do feel like those two shades are, you know, they're a little bit too close. I would have liked to see a little bit more difference in tone for those. And I feel like that kind of contributes to a lot of these shades looking very similar on the eye. We do have that deeper bronze shade. That's a great addition. That white shade I feel like needs to be replaced with something else. I feel like looking at the palette, it's supposed to be more of a satin finish, but it really ends up looking more matte on the eye. And I feel like if they'd use something a little bit more shimmery, not necessarily glittery, but something with a little bit of a creamier formula, I feel like that would have made this palette just a little bit better and you would have seen more distinction with the colors. Overall, I do have to say I really like the incorporation of the deeper brown, but I feel like that would have been perfect if there was more contrast between that first and fifth shade in the palette. So that's kind of my thoughts on the color story, but overall, I think it is a nice palette. So I'd love to know what you think of this palette. Let's go ahead and move on to some comparisons. We're going to start off with some Dior comparisons. So this is Grand Ball. This is number 539. It's a permanent palette. You know, I do feel like this is a more sparkly version of the other one, but I feel like there's a little bit more difference in the tones for all of these. So personally, between these two palettes, I would go with Grand Ball over the Golden Bouquet. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put these right here so you can kind of see the difference because they are very similar color stories. Let me just get that middle shade here. I mean, look how similar the actual color stories are. Obviously, Grand Ball is going to be more shimmery. It's also a bit more pigmented than the Golden Bouquet. So I feel like if you have Grand Ball, you're not missing out on anything that you would get in Golden Bouquet. Another Dior palette, this was out last year, 469 Atelier Doré. This was limited edition. We're actually going to take a look at these two shades here because these are going to be your most similar shades. And let's go ahead and we're just going to put these two right here so you can see those golden tones. Next, I wanted to look at one of the Suku signature color eyes. This is number 3. This is a permanent palette from Suku. You can see here that we do have, you know, some of those more neutral shades and everything. And Suku is known for having lighter shades in general, but you can see that these are going to be more pigmented than the one in Golden Bouquet. But you can also see that you've got some, like it's a little bit warmer, a little bit more, there's like more orangey tones in a couple of these shades. So it's just going to give you a different look completely, in my opinion. This is the Givenchy Holiday Palette from 2021. This is number 9.07. And let's go ahead. We're going to take a look at some of these. We're going to look at these golden browns here. So this is actually a duochrome with like a green. So we're going to skip that. But this dark brown and these golden tones here. And this is more rosy, but we'll swatch that too. So we'll look at those 4. All right. So these are the 4 from Givenchy. And again, you know, color story overall is not going to match, but if you do have this palette, you can see that this like dark brown and the golden tone go fairly well with this shade and this shade here. Oh, this shade's actually Atelier Doré. So sorry, my mistake. These are like peachier and lighter in Golden Bouquet. I'm going to go ahead and re-swatch this so we have it closer to some new shades. And just squeeze that in there. So this is Golden Bouquet. And I wanted to compare a couple of Chanel quads. This is number 308, Clair Obscur. This is an all matte neutral palette. It is not really going to be any sort of dupe or anything, but I just kind of wanted to show you how much cooler this color story is, because I do know a lot of people have this in their collection. It's a classic Chanel palette. We also have the Chanel number 5 palette. This really isn't going to go too well with these. We're going to swatch this kind of right up at the top, but I wanted to show you like how much brighter the golds are. I'm just gonna put that last shade there so you can see that's a black instead. But look at these, you can see these whiter shades actually have a gold reflect. There's just a little bit more presence because of that shimmer in there, and that's what I wish they had done with this white shade in Golden Bouquet. Let's take a look at the Viseart Petit Four in Bullion. And we're just going to swatch all 4 of these. This is going to be much more pigmented. You can tell just by looking at my fingers here. I'm going to put this one here on the side. And you can just see how much richer those colors are in general. And they're also a creamier formula than this Dior. The Dior feels more like your traditional powder eyeshadow formula. These feel a little bit creamier. So we have 3 more palettes to look at. This is Tom Ford Nude Dip, and this again is going to be cooler in tone, and these are all kind of frosty, but I wanted to show you, the lightness here. So go ahead and put that there. But you can see, this is going to be a light palette as well, but it has those frosty tones, and we're actually looking here, these ones here. And this is the Tom Ford Creme Quad in 35 Rose Topaz. I'm just going to squeeze this one down here. Again, we're looking at cooler shades. This has more like pink and mauve in it. And then last up, we're looking at the Chantecaille Cougar Eye Quartet. And these colors, these tones don't look anything like it, but it's another neutral palette that's a big new release right now. So I want to make sure I show you what that looks like. And we're really running out of space. We're gonna put this one on my hand and then we'll re-swatch Dior with this. So this is Cougar. All right, let's look at Golden Bouquet right below it here. We're gonna kind of curve up the side here as well. So here's Golden Bouquet underneath, and you can just see how much softer and lighter the Dior palette is overall. Now the Chantecaille does have different finishes in here, whereas these are pretty much all going to be satin. Again, we have things like this dark brown that's going to be a bit more matte, but overall we have a satin palette versus this one really is split. So I hope those comparisons were helpful. And, overall, I have to say it's a really beautiful palette to look at. I think it's a nice palette, but I do think that there are better options out there. If you're looking for a similar color story and you don't mind shimmer, I would definitely recommend the Dior Grand Ball. I think that is the closest. I think it is better than the Golden Bouquet. And, if that's too shimmery for you, there are other options as well, but I do think that's kind of the closest, but it's just slightly better. So I think the Golden Bouquet is a nice option. It's just not a great option. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'd love to know what you think if you picked this one up and what you think of it so far. So thanks so much and have a great day.